Hello, welcome to session number 3 of the Mayamiko Introduction to Dyeing course. This session is all about preparation, and we're going to start diving into looking at each stage of the process and doing some practical demonstrations so that you can really learn about every aspect of it. So today we're going to focus on cutting, weighing and washing the fabric, which is a super important stage because, as we know, preparation is key. So if we look at this diagram, we're going to see that today we're going to cover these first 3 steps of preparation, and then next session we're going to look at mordanting the fibre. We'll learn about what a mordant is, how we're going to use it and why it's important. So as I mentioned, preparation is key, and if we rush this stage or if we don't take as much time as needed, then the outcome of our finished fabric won't be as good as it could be. So this is a really important stage to get right and to put a lot of time and love into. So starting off, we're going to cut and measure our fabric. And so we're going to use a maximum length of 2 meters per fabric section. And we're doing this because it makes handling the fabric more manageable whilst washing, dyeing and drying it. Of course, we could use smaller amounts like 1/2 meter, and during our sampling process, we might be using smaller squares of fabric, and that's totally fine as well. On certain circumstances, depending on how large the dyeing bucket is, we could stretch to 2.5 meters or 3 meters, really depending on you, the team, how you manage it and how you handle it. But it's good to use 2 meters as a ballpark figure to really aim towards. We need to really consider the end use of the fabric during this stage. What are we going to be making? Because we need to cut the length of fabric so that it corresponds to the pattern of the product, so that we don't waste loads of fabric. We need to remember to account for any shrinkage or raw edges fraying during this dyeing process, so always add a little extra on. And then we need to make sure we're super organised and bundle each cut length of fabric and give it a label stating the length, purpose and dye colour. So much of these stages you'll be so familiar with already in Mayamiko, and you'll be great at them. And so this really is starting at the basics and looking at how we can apply those skills that you already have to the dyeing process. So throughout this series, I'm going to be using demonstration videos from our workshop in Sri Lanka, because I think it gives you a really good insight as to how natural dyeing works within a team and within a workshop context. So here we've got one of our team members preparing the fabric for dyeing. She's trimming off the frayed edges so that they don't get any more frayed or tangled during the dyeing process. And this piece is for a particular accessory, so she has a required length that she needs to cut. So she's measured that piece of fabric and she's taking care in cutting it and ensuring that it's the right length. Once we've cut the fabric, like I mentioned, we're going to bundle the fabric so that it doesn't get confusing. When we're just working by ourselves, we can often just remember what we did next. But when we're working in a team of people, the woman who finished cutting now needs to be responsible to make sure that our dyer, the head dyer, knows which piece of fabric is which. So she doesn't need to spend time measuring or checking. It's really clear for her so that she can do her job really well. So here we can see Mina taking the fabric from the cutting table into the dyeing room, making sure that the fabric is on a clean surface so that no marks or dirt get onto the fabric. As you start the process, you'll see that when there's a busy workshop going on, it's very easy for dyes to splash and mark fabric, and we really want to avoid this as much as possible. So making sure that the fabric has a a good location that you can put the fabric in and you know that it's safe, that it's going to be easy for the dyer to do her job is really key. So once we have our bundles of fabric, the next stage is about weighing the fabric, and this needs to be done when the fabric is dry. And this is key because this will inform how many plants we need to dye that piece of fabric to get consistency every day when we do the dyeing. And there'll always be some variation, but the more consistency we can get, the easier it is, the quicker it is, and the less problems or waste we encounter. So if we take a look at this table, you can see that we've got 3 different plants. We've got pomegranate skins, onion skins, and avocado stones. Now, these are plants which we use in Sri Lanka, but I know are also available in Malawi. And we're going to have to do a lot of testing and experimenting to work out how many plants we need for these colours in Malawi, because it will change depending on, your environment and your water and your type of plants. So here I've put a standard starting point of 50% plants to fabric weight. And so what that means is if we weigh our fabric, and if we look at the first column for pomegranate skins, if we weigh our fabric and that weighs 200 grams, then we need 50%, we need half of that in plants. So we need 100 grams. And so it's a really simple maths, simple calculation. And as we go through this process and we figure out how much plants we need for each item, then we can create a really simple, clear table of instructions which each dyer can look at, and she knows the recipe for each colour. So we might do a test and we might do 100 grams of pomegranate skins, and we might think, oh wait, there's loads of waste there's loads of extra colour. So actually for this section of fabric, for 1 metre of fabric, we actually need less pomegranate skins, so we could decrease the amount. Or we might try it and we might see that the colour is quite weak and we need to add extra, and so we can increase the quantity. So that's what we're going to be doing over the coming weeks to test how much of each item we need within your context of Malawi. So once we've weighed our fabric, now we can move on to washing our fabric. And the aim of this stage is to remove any dirt, grime or starch from the fabric. Now at Mayamiko, we'll be using beautiful organic cotton which has already been washed. So hopefully we won't need to remove much starch at all. And starch is usually added during the weaving process to stiffen the threads so that it becomes easier to weave. And in order to do this washing, we are going to use soda ash or washing powder. And soda ash is an ingredient which is often found in washing powder, but it's just a much simpler solution to use. But really we can look at what is available locally in Malawi or what you use at the moment to wash your fabrics. And so if we're using soda ash, we use 2.5 tablespoons for around 6 meters of fabric, or 1 bucket full of fabric. We need to make sure that the soda ash is really dissolved when we wash it, and we need to make sure we use enough hot water to cover the fabric at a temperature of around 60 degrees if we're using the fabric where the starch has been removed, or if it's not been removed, we need to use much higher, almost at boiling point for the water, so 80 to 100 degrees. We need to stir the fabric to make sure it's washed properly and rinse thoroughly in cool water so that all the washing powder has been removed. So here we've got our head dyer Mina. She keeps the soda ash in a little pot which is labelled so we know what it is and it doesn't get confusing. And she puts the soda ash into the bucket and then adds the hot water. So we use boiling water in the workshop because our cotton isn't organic, it isn't as clean as yours. And Mina will tip that, she'll boil the water, and then she will add the fabric. Make sure stirring the soda ash in really well, because you want to avoid any patches happening on the fabric. So we need all of the fabric to be really even. So here she is stirring in the soda ash to make sure it's all dissolved. It's a lot about multitasking in a workshop. So she will go from one bucket to the next. And then she gets our fabric, which she has unbundled, and she's kept somewhere safe and dry so that it doesn't get marked. And she knows which batch of fabric this is for. And then she'll add the fabric into the bucket. Mina uses a big stick because she finds it more difficult to bend over. But if you want, you can use gloves and mix the fabric in yourself. Just make sure that it's not boiling water. Or you can also use a big stick, which tends to work quite well. And she puts as much fabric in, making sure that there's enough space for the fabric to move around. And then she rinses it in cool water to make sure that all the soda ash is totally out. She uses a washing machine, but in Mayamiko, you can use the bath and just, rinse the fabric so all the soap suds are gone. So that was the introduction to the first 3 stages. Next session, we're going to look at mordanting, the invisible fixer that helps hold the colour to the fabric. I just wanted to mention, because we're going to start off by sampling in Mayamiko to make sure and test the colours to look at the amount of fabric we need and how the fabric takes up the different colour of the plants. We're going to be using lots of little squares to do this, but what I would recommend first is washing a bigger piece of fabric in the process that I just showed you, so that it's a lot easier than washing the little individual squares, because they will fray and it gets challenging. So wash a big piece of fabric first and dry it, and then cut it up into the fabric squares, or even do it when it's wet, and then we can put it into the mordant afterwards. Wonderful. Look forward to the next session and hope you found that useful. Bye.